Don't you think it's about time for a podcast that's more fulfilling? One that's about the vibrant exchange of ideas and perspectives that happens when we actually come together. We got you covered. Welcome to the Deep Blue Project, where the depths of conversation meet the waves of personal experience. This is a real, raw, and unscripted show about everything from leadership lessons to self-awareness, wellness, and the latest current events. We cover it all. We have a rotating cast of guests as we share our personal stories, insights, and opinions on the issues that matter most. Plus, we have a blast while doing it. The Deep Blue Project. It's not just a podcast, it's an experience. And now your host, Chris Workman.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Deep Blue Project. We are happy to have you today. And today, my guest is Barbara Rubel. She is an award-winning author and nationally recognized keynote speaker and trainer on employee and well-being. But most of all, she knows what it's like to deal with first responder issues and first responder mental health. Barbara, welcome. Welcome to the Deep Blue Project.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm very excited for being here, and I appreciate your title, even blue in your title, because we are all living blue.
Love it, and I thank you very much. Just give us a little bit of your background, those who may not have heard about you or know about the things that you're doing.
I'm in the hospital. I'm lying in bed. My husband came into the room and told me that my father killed himself. And here I am in the hospital, about to give birth to not one baby, not two babies, but triplets. When he told me that my father, who was a retired police officer, he was a sergeant, New York City, and he served for over 20 years on the force, but he had deteriorating discs. And he used my mother's weapon because she was a police officer. She was called a police woman at the time. She served for 30 years. She was one of the first New York City cops when they had to wear a dress and carry a nice little purse. And he used her weapon to end his life. His suicide note said that he had deteriorating discs and could not live with the pain any longer. And he ended his life right before becoming a grandpa. What was he thinking? And people ask me, well, shouldn't he have waited till after you gave birth? Like, oh, there's a better time to kill yourself. Thank you. Thank you for that comment. It really helps in my bereavement. And so I was told through the years, because I'm a suicidologist, my focus is postvention. You know, there's prevention, intervention, and postvention. It's Schneidman's work on what is done in the aftermath of a suicide. And so I facilitated support groups, and I wrote But I Didn't Say Goodbye, helping families after suicide. I got involved with the American Association for Suicidology, served on several of their committees. I was on the board of directors, New Jersey chapter of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, got involved with SPAN and SAVE. I was enmeshed in it while I'm taking care of 3 little babies.
Oh, wow.
Because I didn't know what to do with my grief. I could not attend my dad's funeral. I couldn't attend the wake. I'm in the hospital. And so, is Daddy really dead? I didn't say it, but so many of his cops, you know, I talked to them and they were so confused. He was this loving, wonderful man. But the physical pain, he said, I cannot live with the pain any longer. And so he ended his life. And it put me on this road of discovery. Are other survivors out there? This is 1986. This is many years ago. Am I alone in my grief? Am I going crazy? Mm-hmm. And I really got involved with suicide awareness. And it's been my life journey for almost, over 30 years. And I just want people to know that they are not alone. For suicide loss survivors, for those, the wives, the partners, the people that say, why didn't I see the signs? That you might see some signs afterwards. You might afterwards see some red flags, or why didn't I know? Why didn't he say something? What could I have done? All the should haves and could haves. But just know you're not alone, and we know so much more than we did in 1986. And reach out to those who know. So that's why, Chris, I am so grateful that you're talking to me today. I'm a daughter of two cops. I'm a suicide loss survivor, and I care deeply. As I'm a keynote speaker, I focus on this all the time, on building resilience in first responders, not only cops, but anyone who is in human service, who is a first responder, a nurse, even a doctor, anyone who is hurting and listening.
Right. I think I really appreciate you guys reaching out and Teresa reaching out and mentioning to me. I've had the chance to look at your things. And as I said, for me, when I started the Deep Blue Project, I never knew where this was going to begin. Like, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what I wanted the platform to be, and it's cops talking to cops and bringing in other individuals that have the same ideology to help police officers understand, especially newer police officers, that these are things that we never learned. These are things that people never gave us when we started, and I started 20 some years ago. And I'm grateful to the fact that it kind of started with this. It started with officer wellness and health and mental health. It's kind of led to where we are today with you, and touching on that fact of how mental health and how police officer suicide, while everybody doesn't want to talk about it. I mean, however, it's a reality, and it's becoming even more of a reality as we see time go on of officers taking their own lives. And I am so glad for what you're doing and how you've been doing this for a long time, and people don't realize that this has been out there. So I appreciate you coming on and being here and willing to speak about this, and also being the daughter of police officers. You were brought up in this culture. You were brought up in this life. So you've seen it from not only, the professional perspective, but you have the personal perspective.
Yeah, you just triggered something in my brain. I remember sitting at the kitchen table having breakfast with my mom and dad, and my mom had a morning shift. But she said to my dad, Alex, I don't think I should go to work today. And he goes, yeah, you're going to go to work. He goes, no, there's a group. They wanted to, or it was late 1960s. They wanted to kill a female police officer in New York. And she said, I'm a girl cop. So I remember her saying that. And he said, no, you go to work, you do your job. And here I am, this little girl thinking mommy's going to be killed today. And I went to school and I said, my mommy is a policewoman and she's going to be killed today. And because I'm a little girl, nobody debriefed me back then, in the late 60s. So, I remember my teacher saying, I'm sure your mommy's going to be okay. Isn't your daddy a sergeant? And she goes, he'll keep her safe. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Daddy's home. He's sleeping. That's
Crazy.
My world.
Yeah.
Or the time my dad came home, I was playing stoop ball because I'm a Brooklyn kid, and I'm playing stoop ball on a Saturday, and my dad's patrol car comes up, and I'm like, why is daddy home? And he gets out of the car and he's covered in blood, his whole head. He's like, and I'm like this little girl saying, Daddy, what happened? And he goes, nothing, I got a glass bottle thrown at me. And then he went upstairs and I went with him and I was so scared. And my mother said, Alex, what happened? And he said, a bottle was thrown. She goes, all right, let me take the glass pieces out. I'm sitting there watching my mother, who is not a nurse, take glass shards out of my father's head. And then she cleaned them up, put a couple of Band-Aids on and said, gave me a kiss and said, I'm going back to work. And I'm like, what the hell's wrong with these people? But that's the life of a child of two police officers. Things are different now, I'm sure. There's reports. Back then, you don't write shit down. You just don't do it. Things are different then and now. But my whole world was different because I was a daughter of a cop. But my father, he was so resilient, like so many police officers. He was a man of strength. He had his buddies. He loved his family. But the job, it got to him in such a way where at a time when he was dealing with physical pain, his resiliency skills, his strengths didn't come into play. And that's why it's so important that no matter what happens in your life, you know your strengths. Like my greatest strength is love of learning. I'm constantly reading researches. That's why my keynotes and my trainings are best practices, latest studies. I may get up there as this Brooklyn dude, like just hello, how you doing? Let's get into this module 1. But everything I say is based in real science. And that's what's so important, that you know your strengths. I also know my strength is wisdom. So I want to give that away. I wanted to learn and then give it away. I'm curious, Chris, what's your greatest strength?
I think that my greatest strength comes from my greatest fault. I spent lots of years with my family and with doing jobs as a first responder. Now, I've been a first responder for 30 plus years. I've been a police officer for over 24 years. And the thing is I never had that person or those people that helped me get through the things that I had dealt with or seen in life. Because we just like you're talking about, getting hit with a bottle, your father, like coming home and it being nothing. Like we put all that stuff so much behind us that we don't realize the toll that it's taking on us personally. Professionally, we're great. Professionally, we're awesome. I mean, we do our jobs without thinking. We do our jobs and help people without regard for our bodies or anything else. But we put so much away, and 20 plus years or 30 plus years of putting that stuff away, it took its toll on my family life. It took its toll on my health. It took a toll on my mental health. So I'll be 56 in a week.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. But it's taken me till now to realize that I had to start facing those things. And I had to start realizing that all of those traumas and all of that stuff I put away that has started to creep up when I could just be watching something on television and it just sparks something in me to go, and I would just get so emotional and not go like, why am I doing that? But that, I think, has become my strength, and my strength to that has become I needed to learn to talk about that. I needed to find the good outlets and not bad coping mechanisms. We were talking prior to us starting, and Barbara brought up something great, and it's the fact that we turned how many we turned to alcohol, we turned to pills, we turned to unhealthy coping mechanisms. So to flip that around, and through the help of others, this wasn't just me. This was me allowing myself to just believe and talk with one other person who said, man, like, I get it. And me trying to get into the Deep Blue Project that's how it kind of transgressed into what it is right now, and going, if we can put this out there, if I can have people like you, Barbara, on, like Liz, like my friend Matt, like Ernie Stevens, like all these people who talk about this and preach this and who have had that trauma in their life and are now using it to help others, that is where I think I am at this point in my life. So I really appreciate everything that you're doing, and being able to have you on and bring this out for others. As you said, if it helps one other person, that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
I think we can help one other person through your story, because you shared that you had several traumas, and we realized that we have this nerve. It's called the polyvagal nerve. It's Stephen Porges's work. And he said that the nerve goes down the left side of our body, not our spine. It goes down. And every single trauma we've ever had is on that nerve. So like, you say you're getting on my last nerve because you have so many, traumas in there, whether it was, a high ACEs score, adverse childhood experiences, whether it's neglect, physical or emotional abuse. We have so many traumas. I mean, I have so many traumas that I didn't even realize they were traumas until I became a keynote speaker and started sharing all these stories about my parents being cops. And I'm like, wow, that was traumatic. But I didn't even know the word traumatic. But we have to realize through our stories that what happens at work, and you shared this so eloquently, impacts what happens at home. So that's work-life synergy. I don't like that work-life harmony, work-life balance. You can't balance your life. It's out of control. You
Right.
just have to try to make it more controllable. And that's work-life synergy. To realize that what happened during your shift when you go home will impact how you respond to your spouse, your children, your family, your partner, your lover, whoever is at home. And whatever happens at home, domestic violence and screaming and not being able to handle the stressors of whatever's going on, will impact your job, especially not sleeping. Such a huge problem with sleeping. I have a whole chapter in my book on sleeping. It is work-life synergy. And so the way many cops deal with it is before they go home, they go to the bar or they do a hit of they're drinking and smoking and they're not doing healthy things. So we have to focus on that work-life synergy and recognizing that you need to take control of your life and you need to do it now. You need to talk to somebody. So many new studies, because as I said, I read a lot of studies. So many studies show the first responders to mitigate the impact of this stressful career is peer-to-peer programs and talking to a buddy. But talking to a buddy that doesn't say, hey, let's go out for a drink and talk about it. It's not
Right.
going, drinking together isn't, I mean, even though you might start, it's not the way to handle it. Healthy avenues, play golf, go to the gym with your buddy. And while you're working on the weights, you could talk about, hey, the stress is really getting to me, or I'm having these thoughts, this suicide ideation. Well, they're not going to say suicide ideation, but I'm having these thoughts that, I'm thinking of ending it all. You have to listen for the words. They may not say suicide, but they may say, yeah, I just need to end it all. Like I was a hospice bereavement counselor for a couple of years. And I worked with those who were terminally ill. I held their hands while they took their last breath. It was a blessing in my life to be able to do that. But so many family members would say, especially the older men whose wives, after 60 years of marriage, they're dying, would say, I'm going to end it all. I can't live without her. And so I had to look at lethality of a plan. Like, is he really going to end his life when I leave? So we have to listen to the words and recognize people are struggling and give them the tools and strategies, whatever that is, because it's different for everyone. Maybe yoga for you, or maybe somatic experiencing therapy for you, or maybe just a support group, Emotions Anonymous. We're all different. So
Right.
there's no cookie cutter. And then also in regard to suicide prevention, people say we have to talk about prevention. I believe, as so many others, especially Olivia Johnson, who talks about inoculation. We need to go before you're a cop and things are really hitting the fan. Before that, learn the tools, inoculation, go before you get in. Even at the academy level, teach these men and women how to deal with stress that you may never even, like, I'm going to deal with a baby's death. I'm going to deal with a screaming father, save my wife. I'm going to deal with a family who's drowning and I don't know what. Yeah. Before that happens, learn the tools and strategies of wellness, well-being, how to build your resiliency, your own strengths. What strengths are you going to really put into practice to manage and then prevent your own suicide ideation?
Right. You touch on a great topic, and you got there right kind of where I've been trying to do things nowadays, and some of the conversations that we have had. Our problem is we, as leaders, as professionals, whether you're in law enforcement, whether you're in, well, hell, any kind of business, kind of where you're dealing with emotional traumas and stress. First off, we have our own before we ever get into that. Like, we have our own personal stressors, things we've dealt with in our lives, things that have happened to us before we ever got into whatever career we decide to go, that still become stressors. But as far as what you're speaking about now is taking that stigma away from that portion of law enforcement where, I grew up in that time, and I'm sure with your parents and everything, it was like, suck it up, dude, move on. We got the next call to go to. I know you're dealing with that, but hey, we got to go do this. But that
Yeah.
stigma has become so
Yeah.
bad that we need to do exactly what you're saying. That has to be touched on prior to anyone getting in this job and letting them know, yeah, this is what you're going to deal with, but here are the resources if you should find yourself struggling. Not suck it up and drive on, not move on. Take away the stigma before it ever gets there. Give these people an outlet. Give your people an outlet. Make it so it's not taboo for you to say, I'm not okay with this. And there is where the change needs to begin.
And there is where the change is beginning. There are many people who just say, smash the stigma, smash the stigma. That means nothing. How did you prevent suicide today by saying smash the stigma? No, it's not just the phrase. It is saying you're a leader. Now talk about what happened to you. Share your story. Share your struggles. Let everybody know, I'm not having a good day. I'm really struggling with my own stressors today. If a leader does that authentically and shares their own, issues, that will give permission to those that are on the team. I did a training. As I said, I'm a speaker. So I did a training and I was on a panel. I'm on many, many panels. And I was on a panel and a police chief was on the panel and a clergy and a fire chief. And at one point, right before I spoke, the fire chief actually said, I was struggling with mental health and I went to a therapist and I'm on medication and I'm doing so much better. And then someone raised their hand and said, oh, Barbara, what about, and they asked me about, compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma and moral injury, whatever it was. And I said, excuse me, let's just stop a moment and let's just thank this fire chief for being so authentic and so real. God bless you. You might have just saved a life. You gave permission for someone else out there to say, hey, I'm not okay. And then everybody clapped and they gave him a standing ovation. And let me tell you, I'm a speaker. I've gotten a lot of standing ovations in life. They meant nothing in comparison to what I felt when that fire chief, oh my God, I'm getting emotional now, when they stood up for him. We need to, as leaders, stand up for others, but stand up for ourselves and not be embarrassed. We're all screwed up. Come on. We all have our issues. Just say, I'm struggling, or this is what I'm doing. I'm doing somatic experiencing. I'm doing cognitive behavioral therapy, or I'm in a support group, or my peer-to-peer program's working. And what really upsets me outside of the police force is I do a lot of trainings for psychiatric mental health congresses. And so many psychiatrists tell me that they will not see a physician for their mental health problems, or they travel an hour or two away because they don't want anyone in their hospital or community to know that they are struggling. What is that? Are you kidding? And you're a psychiatrist and we're supposed to go to you? I don't understand. I don't get it.
I think that's that thing that we put on ourselves. I got to say for myself, we put that on ourselves. We think that it's a sign of weakness. Like we put out that we have to be that strong person. That view outside has to be that this is impenetrable. I don't feel that like I'm strong and I can deal with that. I can deal with that because I have to deal with that today because that person is struggling because we're dealing with this trauma for them. You have to try to be that person, but the empathy is so much more important than you having that stoic look on your face. But we were brought up that's the shame of it. The old style, we were brought up that way. You were to be, I'm taking charge, and you're walking away going, there's no way. It's not human nature to walk away from a trauma like that or seeing that kind of the way this thing is affecting another family. You can't do it. It's impossible. but you do it and you
Mhm.
put it away and you never touch it again until it'll find its way out. It may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but when you're sitting there and you're thinking about those things that have happened, I had this conversation with Liz Pohl not too long ago, and it was that there's things I can remember, things that I dealt with 25 years ago, like I saw it yesterday. And that's because I've only gotten to a point where I can now start going, I can talk about that because I've let it out. I haven't kept
Mhm.
it stored behind. And I think that us teaching people that kind of thing and getting that out there is where we are at. That's where we have this conversation. That's why I have people like yourself here, is to go, it's all right, but we need to start letting you know that these are what's out there for you. And it's not a shame for you to go looking for that help. So I think that I want to get into. I know we can go anywhere. This is such a big topic, and I can tell you this. I feel like this. I feel like I'm in a therapy session now because I'm so comfortable sitting here speaking with you that I can talk about anything. But I
Thank
really want
you.
to go into something that maybe we can touch on to give people a little bit of more of what you do and kind of help them as they listen. So one of the things that I know that you touch on, and it's occupational burnout. And I think this is definitely something that I can I can really get into agreeing with after all the years I've been doing this, and maybe how that, that balance, or that I think, as you put it, job satisfaction works for
Mhm.
us as first responders, not just as police officers, but as first responders in general.
Well, I think we have to recognize that occupational burnout can happen to anyone in any field. Anyone can be burned out. It's the stressors of work. So whatever your stresses are, it could be your vehicle keeps breaking down, your gun belt, is too heavy, so your back hurts. So, it's different for everyone. But we have to look at occupational burnout and secondary traumatic stress, and how when they both combined or combust, you experience what's called compassion fatigue. So you have the burnout and all the things, your leader, you're not getting along with your coworkers. It's your job, the policies, all the shifts. But then the secondary traumatic stress. So you are working your shift and everyone around you is experiencing primary stress. There was a robbery, there was a homicide, there was, terrible things happening, all this crime. And all the people you are talking with throughout the day experience primary traumatic stress. But somehow you go home and you are experiencing the same exact symptoms as the victims, as those who experience crime. And that's secondary traumatic stress. Now, it's very short lived, doesn't stay with you a long time. But when you have the burnout and the secondary trauma, then you have what's called compassion fatigue. Now, compassion fatigue was defined all like by Figley, like many, many years ago, as these two elements. But you are compassionate because you're a helper and you want to help. But what happens when all these emotional things get in the way of your helping? That's when you experience compassion fatigue. And many officers are going through it. They just don't know how to define it. But once you define it and say, I'm experiencing compassion fatigue, now what can I do to help it? Then you have to move your body. You have to get to the gym. You have to try to, sleep better, sleep hygiene, all those things you have to do before you go to bed. There's so much. I mean, we could get into, adaptive coping mechanisms like from here to eternity, but you need to recognize it's not just burnout. It's compassion fatigue. You also might be experiencing moral injury. And that impacts how you look at your world. Maybe your leader didn't do what needed to be done at the time. Or maybe you should have done something that you didn't do. Or your partner did something and it goes against your morals. It goes against your values, yet you still have to do the work. That's moral injury when it impacts your beliefs and your values. So you're struggling with occupational burnout, secondary traumatic stress, compassion fatigue, and moral injury. Oh, yeah, go home. Have a good night. No, you're not only dealing with that, you're dealing with vicarious trauma. And vicarious trauma stays with you, it can stay with you an entire lifetime. You might have been vicariously traumatized 20 years ago from something that you saw or something that was done, and you were in the middle of that scene, yet it still is alive today as it was 20 years ago. The other person was primarily traumatized, but you, through their story, whether listening or writing, I mean, I did something for court coordinators a few months back, and they said, and it was a chat, it was a virtual, and they said, we never even meet the victim. We're not in the court, but just writing down what happened, the blood, the guts, the horror, the domestic violence, sexual assault, the homicide. We can't sleep at night. And they're just writing down the horror. They're not even in the midst of it as a police officer is. So when you have compassion fatigue, moral injury, and vicarious trauma, well, and you wonder why people can't sleep. You wonder why there's problems at home. You wonder why there's high suicide rate. You wonder why alcoholism is at an all-time high. And that's why, Chris, you are saving lives by doing this podcast, because somebody listening right now is saying, wow, Barbara's talking about me. How does she know me? Oh my goodness. Yeah, I know you. And I know so many people like you. So let's start talking about it.
Right.
Like Chris just said, hey, we gotta talk about it. Inoculation, going back before this happens, before you decide you want to be a cop or go into the armed forces or be a fireman or a firefighter or whatever. Just get the skills. Get the skills before you start just saying, smash the stigma. Because hello, yeah, thank you for that. I'll remember that.
Right.
And do what? Let's really get help. Let's really talk to somebody. Let's call 988.
Yes.
I am
Yes.
not alone. I think we need to keep saying that. I am not alone. Bottom
Yep.
line.
Yeah, and it's just something that needs to be continuous. I want to broaden this because there could be first responders out there. You could be post office. I don't care where you work. You could be listening to this. We all have that. You all have your traumas. You all have the things that you have to deal with, and then you have to deal with life on top of that. Make that phone call. I don't care who it is. If you don't have somebody you can reach out to that's close to you, call 988. If you're an officer, call CopLink, call whatever. Do something. Have that conversation. See, I'm lucky. I'm lucky because I chose, even though late in life, and man, a lot of things that went wrong, and I'm not talking about anything that not one person who listen to this have it. I'm sure you've had divorce. I'm sure you've had family issues. I'm sure you've missed time with your kids. I'm sure you've done a lot of things in your life. If it changes today and you just made that phone call today, well, guess what? Then the rest of your life can be changed forever. Breaking the cycle, and as you said, you can't just keep saying, stop the stigma. Like, somebody's got to do something. So make the choice to do something, because we can't force people to do that. We do that our entire careers. I mean, we deal with things on a daily basis that we're dealing with everybody else's stuff. They don't call me or any other police officer, any other firefighter, any other EMS. They don't call you to come to their place because they want to give you a piece of cake. They're calling you because they got a problem and they want you to solve that problem. So I made a comment to someone talking to the other day, and I said, we spend all day, 8-hour shift, 12-hour shift, whatever shift you're working, solving people's issues. Now, for some people, you're doing it from the time you walk in to the time you get off of your shift. Some of you are doing it a little bit a day, depending on where you work, but you're still doing it. And when you go home, you don't want to deal with nothing. So just make that call. Do what you got to do. Say hello. Just say something. because one little bit can start that conversation that probably lets that floodgate open, and you just feel like, oh, I'm glad I said that.
Yeah, but you know what you're saying is self-compassion. Treat yourself with the same kindness and respect you would treat someone who's been victimized. Give it back to yourself. Show yourself some compassion. Have a flexible mindset and stop this rigid thinking of, I'm done. No, at the end of the day, now it's about you. It's about your family. It's about your mental health, your physical health. Have a positive attitude. Keep your boundaries. Understand why you love your job. Have a sense of humor. Maintain your optimism. Keep your connections close and be self-compassionate. That's my fabulous framework. That's my keynote. FABULOUS. And it just goes to the resiliency, all the studies. It's so simple. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. If you are a rocket scientist, God bless you. You're smarter than me. But you could just be you and realize you have the tools and strategies. First, it takes accountability to say, you know what, I do need to talk to someone. You may not be able to say, I need help. That's a huge statement. So don't go there. What statement can you say? All right, maybe I could talk to somebody. Probably doesn't know what the hell he's doing, but I'll talk to him anyway. Probably smarter than he is. Fine. I don't care. If that's your attitude, that's good. So you speak to someone and get the tools and strategies so your heart can be open, so you could be a leader in your own life, so you could thrive and flourish and look at the world with a sense of awe. That you're not alone in this world, that there are other people struggling too, and have a sense of pride in who you are, and have gratitude. I like to say, like one cop raised his hand a few weeks ago in one of the trainings and said, because I was talking about gratitude, the importance of practicing gratitude. And he said, every single time I'm in my car and I get home, and before I go into the house, I put on a station like a Howard Stern or something, he said, and I laugh for 5 minutes, and I'm grateful for that moment of laughter. And then I close my car and I go in the house and I'm fine. And I'm like, wow, like I never would have thought of that. But okay, it works for him. It may not work for you, Chris, but it doesn't matter because it's not about you. It's about whatever works for you. That's the bottom line. And people come into our lives. Like many years ago, I wrote the book, But I Didn't Say Goodbye, Helping Families After a Suicide. And people said to me, why did you name it such a stupid name? But I didn't say goodbye. I'm like, because my daddy killed himself. And yeah, you could tell me he was a cop, he was a pillar of the community. He had so many strong friends. Everybody loved him. But I didn't say goodbye. So don't judge me for a title. It makes sense to me. So what makes sense to you in what you're doing? And when I wrote that book, this guy contacted me. His name was Jason Palomera. He was a detective in New York. He was a cold case detective, homicide. And he said, I really loved your book, but I didn't say goodbye. It really helped me, blah, blah, blah. And he said, I really want to write a book one day. And I said, well, let's do it together. Complete stranger. Don't know him, but he's a cop. And when someone tells me he's a cop, my dad's mom's cop, all of a sudden we're family,
Right.
Like you said, deep blue, that's it. And we wrote the book. It came out in December of last year, Living Blue, because he was living blue. I'm living blue. And it's about helping law enforcement and their families survive and thrive from recruitment to retirement. And it has given me an opportunity to be on all these podcasts with other police officers and firefighters. And I realized there are so many people struggling. So I'm so blessed that Jason and I wrote this book. I feel so blessed that Teresa at Hayred Speakers Agency hooked us up. Something's bigger than us. Like my book's Living Blue, and your podcast is Deep Blue. What does it mean to be, how would you even define blue? Like the people listening, what does it mean?
I think it's just, for me, it was that everything that we do is associated with that color. Like, our lives, whatever we do. I don't care if, like I said, I started out years ago as a professional firefighter before I got into law enforcement. It's like it just seems like that has been what has been the stigma, or the not the stigma. You're coming that stigma word again. I think it just gets in that thing that everything that has been tied to my life has been that color, my uniform color, what I do, what I deal with every day. People get this, this thing over the thin blue line. I said, the thin blue line is not what you make it out to be out there in the public. That thin blue line is us being that portion of support and brotherhood and sisterhood and things that we deal with, just like you said, as your family, your mother and father being law enforcement officers, and you speaking to Jason and him being a law, that's that immediate connection. That's what the thin blue line is. The thin blue line is not this, this thing that the media turns out to be. It's the connection. It's the color of blue. So why is it deep blue? Why is it living blue? Because that's where we are connected. That's what brings our lives together. That's what connects us as people. That's what allows us to have conversations, and we understand each other when we're talking about things. Because we have our own way of talking, right? We have our own way of relating to things. Prior to us coming on, you and I were having a conversation and said, like, when people introduced you as a mental health professional, and I got that. See, like when you said that to me, I got it, because when you turn the other hand and you say, but my mother and father were police officers. Do you know the credibility that sets in front of a group, a conference hall of law enforcement people or first responders? It automatically changes that narrative. That's blue.
It's true. And you know what I'm hearing when you're speaking is that you're making meaning of the color. And we need to truly, this is Robert Niemeyer's work, making meaning. And we need to make meaning of our life. We need to make meaning of our job. We need to make meaning of our being. Why are you here? Are you here to suffer? Are you here to struggle? Are you here to drink yourself into a stupor? Are you here to argue with your wife? What are you here for? What's the meaning of your career if that work-life synergy isn't making your home life special? It needs to be special both in your career and at home. We're living blue. We are deep blue. And it is more than just a color. It's symbolic of our life to make meaning of who you are in this life of yours.
Barbara, I appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate this conversation, because the question you just asked me was the question that nobody's ever asked me, and I really never thought about it, and I guess I didn't really think about it then. I just kind of told you what it meant to me, and I'm sure it means things to everybody. Don't get me wrong, like it's not. We all live this life. We all have our issues. We all have our problems. We all have what we do. But you face that. You face whatever that thing is, and you move forward. Stop beating yourself up, because trust me, I've done it. Stop reliving the things you've apologized for, or the things that you've dealt with. Like, they're scars, they're marks. You've dealt with them. You know what? If nobody lets it go, it's got to be you. Because if you want to keep it alive, that's where we start. And this is what I'm learning late in life. This is where we start re-traumatizing ourselves over and over and over again. I'm learning more through this podcast about what people are putting out there and what people are doing, and it's helping me. It's helping me, and I know that it can help others. If you find one thing that resonates with you, just do it. As you said, it may not work for you, it may not work for them, but if it works for you, let's do it. So, Barb, what do you got coming up? What do you got going on? I know you do a lot of speaking. I know you got some books out there. Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you got going on? So if people want to get a hold of you, if they want to talk to you, if they want to reach out, they can do that.
Thank you. Boy, they can always reach out on LinkedIn. I'm have so many people that these are strangers who have become friends. It's the strangest thing. But my LinkedIn relationships, I feel like I know them and I care about them. So LinkedIn is great. My website is my name, Barbara Rubel, Barbara. Rubel is RUBEL.com. And I have so many articles on there on first responder mental health and managing vicarious trauma and dealing with the symptoms of compassion fatigue. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to go all over. Just go to barbararubel.com and read all that stuff, because it's based in best practices and evidence-based studies. I wrote that book. I'm so excited, with Jason Palomera, called Living Blue, helping law enforcement officers and their families survive and thrive from recruitment to retirement. That's on Amazon. And But I Didn't Say Goodbye, helping families after a suicide. I think it's in its third edition since the 1990s. That book does very, very well with suicide loss survivors. It's about the aftermath. And the character in the book is a 10-year-old boy who teaches adults how to manage their grief. He's the smartest little boy in the whole world, because it really is my father's voice that I put into this child. Mm-hmm. And people say, he's the most smartest little boy ever. I'm like, yeah, because it's my dad talking through this kid in the story. Thank you. Daddy would love that. I'm a keynote speaker, so I'm all over the place. I'm all over the country traveling. But my Speakers Bureau, Hey Red, hooked us up, Chris. And I'm so grateful for Therese for doing this, because I think perhaps maybe we saved a life today, or maybe saved a marriage. So whatever we did, I'm just so blessed to have this opportunity. So thank you, Chris. Thanks so much.
Barbara, I'm so grateful for your time. I thank you very much for coming on. And I am sure somewhere down the line, you and I will be able to have this conversation and another conversation again, because it's all about just getting the word out there and helping people. And hopefully someday we'll be able to get in touch in person. I mean, of course, you run the keynote speaker thing, and you speak in a lot of places, and kind of through a lot of the things that I do, I'm in a lot of places. So I'm sure hopefully one day we'll be able to catch up and have this conversation in person. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. And you take care, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Deep Blue Project. As a father, husband, friend, and someone who loves to chat about anything and everything, Chris brings over 3 decades of public service experience to the table. With a background in firefighting and law enforcement, along with degrees in criminal justice and behavioral science, he's seen it all, and he's learned a thing or two along the way. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, find us on LinkedIn and X at Deep Blue Project. Find our website at deepblueproject.com. And to reach out, send an email to deepblueproject@outlook.com. Keep keeping it real, and we'll see you next time on the Deep Blue Project.